What if I told you that everything you do, every desire, every ambition, even your most noble goals, might actually be driven by impulses you'd never want to admit? According to Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, your actions aren't always what they seem. Behind your dreams of success, love, and happiness lurk instincts far darker. Instincts you've repressed so deeply you don't even know they're there. Freud believed we are constantly torn between two forces: the life drive, eros, which seeks love, connection, creation, and thanatos; the death drive, a subconscious yearning for destruction, chaos, and self-sabotage. Now here's where it gets disturbing. Freud argued that civilization itself, everything we call progress, is built on suppressing our darkest urges. Not removing them, just burying them. And the more we suppress, the more twisted they become. Your sense of morality, that might just be guilt, inherited from centuries of repression. Your compassion, a coping mechanism for buried aggression. Even your attraction to others, possibly shaped by unresolved childhood traumas. This isn't just theory. Freud's ideas changed how we understand crime, art, relationships, power, and even war. But the deeper you go into his world, the more uncomfortable it gets. Because if Freud was right, you don't really know why you do what you do. You only think you do. If this already has your mind spiraling a little, you're in for a wild ride. Make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video. Because what you're about to learn isn't just psychology. It's a mirror into your hidden self. The mask of civilization. There's a version of you that everyone sees. Polite, reasonable, well-adjusted. The version that shows up to work, smiles at neighbors, and says the right things in front of others. But according to Freud, this version of you is just a mask. A carefully constructed performance to survive in a world that demands control. Because beneath that mask, it is chaotic. Freud believed that humans are not naturally moral, we're not born kind, selfless, or civil. Instead, at our core, we are instinctual creatures, driven by desires society labels as dangerous. Lust, rage, greed, and even the urge to destroy. If we acted on these urges freely, civilization would collapse overnight. So how do we survive? We repress. We push those instincts deep into the unconscious mind, into a psychological dungeon Freud called the ID. And we replace them with a controlled, socially acceptable version of ourselves, what Freud called the ego. But here's the twist. Repression doesn't erase those urges. It just hides them. Like a pressure cooker sealed tight, our unconscious mind stores all the things we're not allowed to feel. The jealousy, the aggression, the inappropriate fantasies. And over time, that pressure builds, until it starts leaking out, in ways you don't expect. That sarcastic joke you made but couldn't explain? That irrational reaction during an argument? That dream that disturbed you for days? All symptoms of a mind trying and failing to keep the mask intact. Society needs the mask. Freud argued that without it, there would be no order, no law, no relationships. But wearing it too tightly comes with a cost. Neurosis, anxiety, guilt, and even physical illness. He believed that many of our mental health issues weren't just chemical imbalances, they were spiritual suffocations. The soul crushed under centuries of thou shalt not. And the real kicker? The more moral a person tries to be, the more aggressive their superego becomes, the inner critic that punishes you for wanting the very things you're wired to want. Let that sink in. The more you strive to be good, the more you might secretly hate yourself for failing. In Freud's world, civilization is both a blessing and a curse. It gives us safety, structure, meaning, but it also demands constant psychological self-censorship. We trade authenticity for approval. We trade instinct for acceptance. And in the process, we begin to forget who we really are. Or worse, we become afraid of finding out. So next time you catch yourself saying, I don't know why I did that. Maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was the real you, slipping through the cracks in the mask. The two drives, love and death. Beneath all the layers of personality, culture, and memory, Freud believed we are governed by two ancient, unstoppable forces. Not morality, not logic, Just two opposing drives fighting for control inside every human being. Eros and Thanatos. The drive to create and the drive to destroy. Let's start with Eros, the life drive. It's what makes you seek pleasure, connection, sex, love, intimacy. Anything that preserves life and brings people together. Eros fuels reproduction, art, laughter, even your desire to learn. It's why you nurture others, why you build homes, write poems, start families, and dream of a future. It's the glue of civilization. Sounds beautiful, right? But then there's Thanatos, the death drive. Cold, silent, relentless. It's the part of you that wants to destroy what you've built. That sabotages your own happiness. That secretly thrills at danger. Freud didn't think this was metaphorical. He believed humans carry a real, subconscious impulse toward self-destruction, a desire to return to a state of non-being. And it doesn't stop with the self. Thanatos also drives outward. It leaks into violence, cruelty, war, addiction. Freud saw global conflict not as a political problem, but as a symptom of collective death drive erupting across society. It's not just soldiers who kill. Ordinary people, you and me, carry this buried hunger for destruction, masked by civility. Ever wondered why people slow down to look at a car crash? Or why someone burns down a relationship they begged for? Why artists destroy their own work? Why some of the most successful people spiral into self-sabotage at their peak? That's Thanatos at play. And what's truly disturbing? These two forces, Eros and Thanatos, aren't enemies. They're lovers. Freud saw them intertwined in everything. The passion that creates life can also destroy it. Even sexuality, according to him, has traces of aggression and control. That's why love and hate often come in the same package. Why desire can turn dark. Why people hurt the ones they claim to love. It's not dysfunction. It's human nature. He believed we're constantly balancing these drives. Civilization leans on Eros to keep us connected, creative, and productive. But Thanatos never really leaves, it just waits. Sometimes it slips out in dreams. Other times in addiction, rage, or war. Sometimes it quietly whispers, "End it all." And when it does, Eros fights back. You fall in love. You build again. You dream again. But the dance never stops. The most chilling part? You might not even notice when one drive takes over. Because both speak in the voice of your own mind. You think you're choosing. But maybe the choice has already been made. Repression. The silent puppeteer. Imagine a puppeteer pulling your strings. Not with ropes or wires, but with forgotten memories, hidden desires, and twisted fears you didn't even know you had. According to Freud, that puppeteer is repression. And it's been quietly running the show your entire life. Repression is the mind's way of locking away the things you can't face. Painful memories, taboo desires, disturbing thoughts. They don't just vanish. They're buried deep in your unconscious, sealed behind psychological walls so thick, you start believing they never existed at all. But buried isn't gone, and what's repressed returns. Let's break this down. You're taught from a young age what's right and what's wrong. But those rules don't erase your instincts. They just teach you to hide them. Wanting to hit someone? Inappropriate attraction? Rage toward a parent? You don't act on it, so your mind tucks it away. You think you've moved on. But that repressed energy has to go somewhere. It seeps out sideways. A sarcastic insult disguised as a joke. A panic attack that comes out of nowhere. A strange recurring dream that leaves you sweating. Freud believed these were symptoms of repression. The unconscious doesn't speak in language. It speaks in symbols, slips, neuroses. Think of the infamous Freudian slip, when someone accidentally says something deeply revealing. That's not a mistake. That's the unconscious breaking through. Take this real case. A woman develops a sudden, unexplained fear of water. No trauma, no accidents. But under hypnosis, she recalls being nearly drowned by a sibling in childhood. A memory her conscious mind had completely erased. Once remembered, the fear began to fade. Repression doesn't just bury memories. It distorts your behavior. your choices, even your health. Freud saw many physical illnesses as psychological in origin. Chronic pain, paralysis, even blindness, all appearing in people with no clear medical explanation. He called these conversion disorders, the body expressing what the mind refuses to. And this isn't just theory from a dusty past. Modern neuroscience confirms it. Trauma rewires the brain. Repressed experiences can activate the amygdala, the brain's fear center, even when you're not consciously aware of the trigger. But here's the twist. Repression isn't evil. It's survival. If a child faces abuse, or a person witnesses horror, repression protects the mind from shattering. It buries the unbearable to keep you functioning. But as you grow, those buried pieces start demanding to be heard. And the more you ignore them, the louder they become. Nightmares, anxiety, sabotaged relationships, destructive habits. You might think you're in control, but the puppeteer is always there, just out of sight. So when you feel something stirring under the surface, a strange fear, an unexplained emotion, a reaction you don't understand, maybe it's not irrational, maybe it's repressed, and maybe it's time to listen. Childhood, trauma, and the twisted self. Freud once said, "The child is the father of the man." It sounds poetic, but in Freud's world, it's a warning. Because he believed the adult you are today is built almost entirely on the unconscious scars, secrets, and desires you inherited from your earliest years, long before you ever had the words to explain them. This is where things get uncomfortable. To Freud, childhood wasn't innocent. It was a battlefield, a psychological war zone where identity, sexuality, and trauma were quietly forming, shaping a blueprint of who you would become. Let's start with the controversial part, infantile sexuality. Now, Freud didn't mean children experience sexuality the way adults do, but he argued that even babies have instinctual sources of pleasure, what he called erogenous zones, and the way those early pleasures are managed by caregivers has a profound impact on personality. Through stages, oral, anal, phallic, latency, and genital, children go through intense psychological development. And if something goes wrong in one stage, you don't just forget it. You carry it with you. Take the oral stage. A baby finds comfort in sucking, feeding, and closeness. If that stage is disrupted through neglect, early weaning, or cold parenting, the adult may become clingy, dependent, constantly seeking reassurance. Ever met someone who can't be alone? Who chain smokes or emotionally overeats? Freud would point to unresolved oral trauma. Or the anal stage, all about control. If a child is overly punished during potty training, they may grow up overly rigid, controlling, obsessed with cleanliness. Hello, perfectionists and micromanagers. Then comes the phallic stage where things get darker. Freud introduced the now infamous Oedipus complex. The idea that children, around ages 3 to 6, develop unconscious sexual feelings for the opposite sex parent and jealousy or rivalry toward the same-sex one. It sounds disturbing. It is disturbing. But Freud wasn't saying this literally happens in full awareness. He believed these are symbolic, buried drives. The child doesn't consciously desire their parent, but the emotional entanglement, the competition for love, the confusion of closeness and control, it imprints deeply. And here's the haunting part. If this complex isn't resolved, it twists, creates guilt, shame, self-loathing. The child represses the forbidden feelings, and they return later in adult relationships, through attraction to unavailable partners, fear of intimacy, or unconscious sabotage. Every adult dysfunction, every irrational fear, broken relationship, or self-destructive habit. Freud would ask, what happened in childhood? What did you bury so deep you forgot it ever happened? Modern psychology doesn't take every Freudian idea literally, but many agree with the core truth. Childhood trauma, especially if unspoken, wires the brain for pain. The abused become anxious. The neglected become numb. The shamed become avoidant. And unless you revisit those hidden corners, you're not really living as you. You're acting out a story written before you could even read. Freedom or illusion. You like to believe you're in control. That your choices are yours. That when you fall in love, change careers, or walk away from something painful. It's because you decided to. But what if that freedom is just an illusion? Freud didn't see the human mind as a clean slate or a rational machine. He saw it as a chaotic battleground, a place where unconscious desires, childhood wounds, and social pressures quietly fight for dominance. And the conscious you? Just a referee, unaware of the real game being played. Think about it. You say you want happiness, stability, love. But then you pick the partner who hurts you. You procrastinate the dream job. You repeat the same toxic cycles. Why? Because deep down, something else is choosing for you. Freud's model of the mind, the ID, ego, and superego is more than theory. It's a framework for understanding internal conflict. The ID wants pleasure. Instantly. The superego demands perfection, morality, guilt.
And the ego?
It's just trying to survive the crossfire, to keep the peace between wild desire and rigid control. You call it a gut feeling or self-sabotage. Freud called it the unconscious pulling the strings. Now here's the dark truth. The more you repress, the more powerful the unconscious becomes. It doesn't go away. It just gets smarter, sneakier, disguising itself as intuition, fate, or just the way things are. Ever feel drawn to someone for no logical reason? Ever destroy something good in your life and have no idea why? Ever find yourself in a situation that feels eerily familiar? That's not coincidence. That's repetition compulsion, Freud's idea that we unconsciously recreate old traumas, hoping for a different outcome. But the past doesn't change. It just repeats unless you break the pattern. So, are we ever really free? Freud believed that freedom begins with awareness. Not by denying the unconscious, but by inviting it to speak. Through therapy, dreams, slips of the tongue, and reflection, we start to hear the voice behind the mask. And once we understand the script, maybe, just maybe, we can start to rewrite it. But total freedom? Freud was skeptical. He saw civilization as necessary but psychologically costly. He saw self-awareness as liberating but always limited. You can't erase the ID, silence the superego, or escape your childhood. But you can learn to listen, to notice when you're reacting, instead of choosing, to catch the patterns before they repeat. And in that moment, that pause between impulse and action, maybe there's just enough space for something rare, powerful, and real, a choice that's truly yours. If this journey through Freud's dark world of human motivation has sparked something in you, something unsettling, maybe even liberating, then this isn't the end. It's a beginning. Like if this shook your perspective. Comment what part of Freud's theory hit you the hardest. And subscribe because we're not done exploring the unconscious just yet.